Today we're going to discuss about filing H4 plus EAD. What is a better strategy of filing H4 plus EAD? Emily, is it better to file H1 and H4 and EAD separately, or is it better to file it together?
Our experience, especially if you're doing premium processing on the H1, is to file all three together.
What if some of the employers are telling that they don't want to file EAD, they only want to file H1B and H4? What is your advice for them?
Yeah, that can cause delays in the EAD. So, what we would recommend is if you have an employer that won't file the EAD, have them just file the H1B alone. And then once you have the receipt notice for the H1B, you file the H4 and H4 EAD together based on the receipt notice on your own. That way, the H4 and EAD are processed together, they go to the same service center, and it'll be a smoother process.
Emily, if, for example, H4 is already filed, while the H4 is pending, if can the H4 EAD be filed?
It can. Now, the USCIS instructions suggest that you should file it based on an approved H4 or file it along with the H1B, but we've filed many, many times based on a pending I-539 application and never had any issues with that.
Who is eligible for H4 EAD, Emily? Is every H4 eligible or only certain people are eligible?
Right. To be eligible for the H4 EAD, the H1B spouse needs to have the approved I-140 or be eligible for an extension of stay beyond the 6-year limit based on having a pending labor certification or a pending I-140.
If my EAD is expired and my H4 has also expired and my H4 and EAD extensions are pending, can I continue working for 180 days?
No, based on just having the pending extension, no, the 180-day auto extension for the EAD does not apply.
What if the online EAD status says it's been approved, but I didn't get a card? Can I still work on? Can I still work?
No, you need to wait for the physical card because your employer will have you fill out an I-9 form or a re-verification of your employment authorization. And to do that, you need to have the actual card in your hand because you have to provide that to your employer as part of that process.
Is there a premium processing for H4 or EAD or combination of both?
Currently, no. Hopefully, we'll see that this year.
Can we apply? So if I'm applying the EAD for first time, can we apply Social Security along with the EAD?
You can, yes. The I-765 form was updated recently to allow you to ask for the Social Security number to be provided as part of the EAD approval.
Emily, what are the chances of expediting the EAD? I mean, this is a common question asked, though.
Yeah, it's really tough right now. There are specific criteria, and even if you feel that you meet those criteria, it's still discretionary. So the USCIS officer that you talk to on the phone will put the information that you provide into the system, and then a lot of times we see 24 hours later you get an email just saying it's been denied, no explanation at all. So the requirements to qualify for the expedite are severe financial loss to the company or to you individually, but simply losing your job isn't enough. It needs to be severe and it needs to be major financial consequences if you're not able to work. And it can't be, the delay can't be on your end in filing. They look at emergencies, humanitarian reasons, nonprofits. If you work for a nonprofit, you may be able to get an expedite that way, or other government interests. Beyond that, the best chances of getting the expedite are for healthcare workers. That's the latest update from USCIS. They do allow healthcare workers to request an expedite, and we are seeing some of those coming back positively and getting the card quickly. It's not 100% just because you're in healthcare, they are not approving them across the board, but that is the best chance of getting the expedite.
If you're looking for expediting the EAD, guys, do not contact our office. We get a lot of calls, and there's not much other than what Emily has said that we can do. So please do not contact us. We will not be able to help you out in the expedited EAD processings, though. Emily, when the H1B, H4, and EAD is filed together, will the H1B, H4, and EAD approved together, though?
Not since the biometric appointment was required in 2019. They split everything up. Um, they did eliminate or suspend the biometrics for the H4 in order to improve processing times, but they still have not made it a policy of adjudicating all three together. That being said, we've seen a few very few, a handful of cases where they actually got all three approved together just in the past month or two. So hopefully that's a good sign, but definitely not across the board.
What about H4 and EAD? If they are filed together, will they be approved together?
Yeah, I would say 90% of the time they are approved together when they're filed together. The few cases where they're not is if for some reason there's an issue with the EAD application. Sometimes people forget to submit photographs, for example, the passport photos, or they forgot to submit a copy of a needed document. Those are the most common situations where the H4 is approved, but the EAD is still pending because they send an RFE to get the RFE response back, and only then can they approve.
I would say about 96% of the time or so, H4 and EAD will be approved together if it's been filed together, though. Emily, if I am an OPT or STEM extension, and if I file for H4 EAD and my OPT STEM extension is still valid and my H4 and EAD is pending, do I need to stop working?
Right. So when you're converting from F1 to H4, you need to file the change of status to H4 and the EAD both at the same time. So the I-539 and the I-765. As long as your current employment authorization, if it's the OPT or the STEM OPT, remains valid, you can continue working even though you filed a change of status to H4. In that change of status application, you actually can select a start date that you want the H4 status to take effect, which allows you to continue your F1 status and your OPT time until it expires and then wait for the EAD to be approved.
What if I want to stop working after filing, even if my STEM extension is still valid? Can I stop working?
Yeah, you technically can. Once the H4 is filed, you can consider you're not actually in H4 status yet, but from that point going forward, it's no longer mandatory for you to continue to maintain the prior status. So if you wanted to take a break, you could stop working.
So if I have a STEM extension, I can, once the H4 plus EAD is filed, I am to pick whether I can work or stop working.
Exactly.
What about the same situation if the H1B and I'm trying to move to H4 plus EAD?
Yeah, same thing. If you when you file that H1B, I'm sorry, when you're filing that H4, you request a specific start date. So you can have that be at the day your H1B is expiring. So you continue working on the H1B until the H4 and EAD are approved, as long as the H1B hasn't expired. Or you could stop working on the H1B as soon as the H4 is filed and wait for the H4 and EAD to be approved.
Emily, when we file for H4 or H4 plus EAD, it clearly indicates that either we have to send it to Dallas or Phoenix. Do I get to pick which place to send it to?
No, unfortunately, it's 100% based on the service center where the H-1B is filed. They're all filed together, or even when filing separately, the filing addresses tell you which service center or which lockbox to mail it to based on the receipt number of the H-1B.
Emily, what is the circumstances where if I file the H4 plus EAD extension, is there any hacking around in this 180-day work period that recently about the court case some people were speaking about?
Yeah, so there is a new 180-day automatic extension for those that have the EAD and have filed the extension. It is limited in who it applies to, because in order for it to apply, you need to have an I-94 for your H-4 status that extends beyond your current EAD validity. So for someone who already got the H-4 extension and now you're filing the EAD, yes, you could get the auto extension as long as that EAD is filed before the current one expires. For people who have to file the H-4 extension along with the EAD, it's a little more difficult. The best workaround we came up with, that what we would normally do pre-COVID, is have you go outside the U.S., get the H-4 stamped based on your spouse's H-1B approval that's already extended, come back, and then file the EAD extension before it expires. That gives you the automatic 180 days. During COVID, consulates are not operating. You can't get an appointment. Even Dropbox appointments are hard to come by. So the workaround would be to try to use automatic revalidation, which allows you to travel to Canada or Mexico for less than 30 days, as long as you don't go for stamping, and you can return as long as you have a valid I-94. Now with this, there's no guidance saying you can or can't do this, but we have had success where people come in on with the I-94 of their H-1B spouse, and CBP will give them an I-94 for H-4 to the same end date. So you kind of can get an extension of your I-94 that way. Definitely not 100% across the board, but it has been working in certain situations. And we do have a separate video on that as well.
And we're going to put a link on that. For the 180 days, first thing is that even if your passport visa expires, it's fine. But the H4 validity, valid I-94, the current H4 must not have expired. We always recommend people to go in the flight rather than the land, because some of the time when people are crossing the border through land and coming back, they're not getting the extension. We also recommend it to stay there for 2 nights. That's the best way to get it. It's also recommended to have your spouse go with you so that it's easier. But I'll put a link for another video that that gives more detail about extending it by 180 days. Now, summarizing what Emily has pointed out is that it's better to file H1, H4, and EAD together. If by any chance you can't file all of these three things together, at least file the H4 plus EAD together. That is the best strategy in filing the applications of H4 plus EAD. Anything else, Emily, before we conclude?
No, I think that's it.
Thank you very much.